Have you ever walked into a room full of people, a room buzzing with laughter, success, and shining lights, and still felt completely invisible? Have you ever looked at someone you loved, someone who once promised to protect you, and realized they don't see you anymore? Not your dreams, not your worth, not the pieces of yourself you've quietly carried for years. Because sometimes the deepest kind of loneliness isn't being lonely, it's being forgotten by the person standing right beside you. Tonight's story begins in a place built for power. A gala so polished and so breathtaking that every corner looked like it was designed to impress. It was the kind of night where handshakes felt like currency, where smiles were strategic, and where one wrong moment could change everything. And into this glittering world walked a woman who looked like she belonged there, but felt more invisible than ever. Natalie, elegant, quiet, carrying years of dreams no one bothered to see. To the outside world, she appeared lucky, the wife of a successful man, dressed in beauty, wrapped in wealth. But beneath the shine were sacrifices no one knew about, the silent disappointments, the dreams she had set aside piece by piece, the parts of herself she'd hidden just to keep the peace. What no one realized was that this night, full of champagne, cameras, and perfect illusions, would become the moment that woke her up. Because sometimes all it takes is one cruel comment, one public dismissal, or one unexpected witness to remind a woman who she truly is. And tonight, someone was about to see her more clearly than her husband ever did. The ballroom looked like something pulled straight out of a dream. Golden chandeliers blooming across the ceiling, hundreds of candles glowing in tall glass towers, and a city shimmering beyond the open velvet curtains. Everything sparkled. The people, the music, even the conversations. And right in the center of all that glitter walked Natalie Finch. Her emerald gown flowed behind her like soft silk. The crystals in her hair caught every passing light. From a distance, she looked perfect, elegant, poised, the kind of woman who belonged in a room built for power. But looks can lie, because while the room welcomed her husband with cheers, it barely noticed her at all. Gregory walked one step ahead, always ahead, soaking up the spotlight, the attention, the praise. Every smile, every greeting, every burst of excitement was aimed at him. "Greg, over here! Gregory, you made it! Greg, we need you on this deal. Big opportunity tonight." And just like that, Natalie faded into the background. She waited politely for an introduction that never came. She offered small smiles that nobody cared to return. People glanced at her the way you glance at a painting on the wall. Nice, but unimportant. Gregory laughed loudly, telling stories with big gestures, as if the whole room revolved around him. Meanwhile, Natalie stood quietly at his side, trying not to feel the sting of being invisible. She once walked into rooms like this as an equal, full of ideas, passion, and ambition. She used to believe her voice could shape cities, but tonight, she couldn't even shape a simple conversation. A group nearby chatted excitedly about architecture, her field, her passion. She stepped closer, ready to add something meaningful. But before she could speak, Gregory's booming laugh tore through the moment and swallowed her voice whole. The chance slipped away, just like so many others. A photographer approached, asking for a picture. She smiled on cue. The cameras flashed. Her face lit up, but her spirit didn't. And in that dazzling room, surrounded by light, music, and hundreds of people, Natalie felt the sharp, painful truth sink in. She wasn't just overlooked. She was forgotten. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that tonight wasn't the night she breaks, it's the night she wakes up. The gala kept moving around Natalie, bright, loud, and overflowing with people who seemed too busy shining to notice the cracks forming inside her. She drifted through the crowd like someone wandering through a dream she didn't recognize anymore. Every polite smile felt thin. Every quick greeting felt hollow. Every moment reminded her how small she had become in a life she once imagined would be big. She didn't go to the bar to escape. She just wanted a little space, a habit she'd carried for years without ever stopping to ask if it still made sense. Behind her, whispers floated through the noise, not loud, not direct, just sharp enough to hit the tender places. "Isn't that Finch's wife? Didn't she do garden stuff?" "Yeah, a gardener. Cute." They laughed. The casual cruelty stung deeper than they would ever know. All her hard work, her degree, her passion, reduced to a punchline said by people who didn't even know her name. She steadied the champagne in her hand and went searching for Gregory. Maybe to feel included, maybe to feel seen, maybe just to feel something. She found him exactly where she expected, surrounded by admirers, laughing a little too loud, performing like the world was his stage. She offered him his glass, a small gesture, a quiet hope for a little connection. He took it without looking at her, then picked up the second glass and handed it, not to her, but to the woman beside him. The reporter, the one who'd been smiling at him like he was the main act of the night. The glass in her hand suddenly felt heavier, as if it carried every unspoken hurt from the last few years. The reporter lifted the stolen glass and smiled. "Gregory, tell me about the Waterfront Fund. We're running a feature on visionaries tomorrow." He basked in the attention. He thrived in it. Actually, the natural water flow integration. But Gregory's laughter cut clean through her sentence like a blade. "Honey, not now," he said, his voice dipped in condescension. "We're talking about big capital." Her mouth closed. The group chuckled, and the moment fell flat at her feet. Color rose in her cheeks, not embarrassment, but a quiet, building fire. She walked away from the circle, her champagne glass still full, her heart suddenly heavier than the room around her. The balcony called to her, cool air, open space, a place where the noise couldn't reach. Outside, the night felt honest, sharp, wide. She clutched the railing, breathing in the cold air, trying to steady the storm inside her. Tears didn't come. Pain can do that. It sharpens the truth. Inside that ballroom, she had been shrinking for years. Out here, for the first time in a long time, she felt the size of the woman she used to be. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this quiet, trembling moment on a balcony, was the beginning of the rest of her life. The rain had softened into a mist, turning the city lights into watercolor streaks across the night. Natalie walked with no plan, no umbrella, no real destination, just forward. Each step away from the gala felt like stepping out of someone else's story and back into her own skin. Eventually, her feet carried her back toward the building, not because she wanted to return, but because its warm lights were the only thing familiar in a night that suddenly felt too big. She stood under the overhang, rain dripping from her hair, her gown clinging to her like a heavy memory. A soft click sounded behind her, the glass door opening. She stiffened. She braced herself. She thought it was Gregory, ready with another lecture, another reminder of what she should have done. But the footsteps were calm, gentle, nothing like his. She turned slightly and saw him, the stranger from the terrace. He wasn't holding champagne. He wasn't wearing a fake smile. He wasn't pretending not to notice her pain. Instead, he carried a gray wool coat over one arm and two steaming paper cups in his hands. He walked toward her and stopped just close enough to show respect, but far enough to give her space to breathe. "You left quickly," he said softly. Not prying, not judging, just noticing. She blinked. "Did someone send you?" He shook his head. "No, you just look cold and like someone who shouldn't be alone right now." He held out the coat, not insisting, just offering. She accepted it slowly, feeling the warmth instantly. It felt strange to be cared for without being controlled. He handed her one of the cups. "Peppermint hot chocolate," he said. "Only thing at that bar that tastes like an actual human made it." A tiny laugh escaped her, the tired kind, the surprised kind. He stood beside her, leaning lightly against the wall, not crowding her space. "I saw what happened inside," he said. She lowered her gaze. "I'm fine," she murmured out of habit. He gave her a gentle, knowing smile. "You don't have to pretend with me." Her breath hitched, not from sadness, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being understood. "How did it look?" she asked quietly. He took a moment, then answered with honesty. "Like a brilliant woman trying to speak in a room that only values noise." The words stunned her. He continued, "What you said about natural elements, that wasn't small talk, that was expertise." She looked up at him, caught off guard. "You know about that?" "I do," he said, his eyes calm, thoughtful. "And when you spoke, they should have listened." The rain tapped gently against the roof, like a soft applause for truths long overdue. "No one takes me seriously anymore," she said. "That's because you've been standing next to people who benefit from your silence," he replied. "Not because you're lacking anything." A single drop slid down her cheek, rain, or maybe something else. He set his cup down on the ledge and extended his hand. "My name is Adrian Vale, urban redevelopment, investor, occasional troublemaker." Her breath caught. Everyone in her field knew the name. He waited, letting her decide. Finally, she placed her hand in his. Natalie Finch." He nodded slowly, like he was memorizing her. Tell me, he said gently, what did you want to build before you built your life around someone who never looked at you properly? The question hit her chest like a realization she wasn't ready for. She swallowed. I had this project, a redesign of the old canal district, my thesis, a full ecological restoration. He listened with intent, not interrupting, not doubting, just fully present. Where is it now? He asked. She let out a sad, hollow laugh. In a box under my bed. He looked toward the glowing city. Cities wait decades for ideas like that, he said softly. And people wait lifetimes for courage like that. He reached into his coat and handed her a simple matte card. Send it to me, he said. I'm not promising anything, but I can promise your voice won't be dismissed with me. She held the card like it was warm, like it was hope. Why would you care? She whispered. He met her eyes. Because I saw you tonight. Not the dress, not the role. You. The mind, the fire, the brilliance. And some minds are too rare to let them shrink in someone else's shadow. Her heart stuttered. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe again. You don't have to decide now, he said, but when you're ready, email me. She's stronger than you think. The rain eased, the light shimmered, and for the first time in years, she felt possibility bloom inside her again. The music from the ballroom faded behind her as Natalie walked down the quiet corridor, each step carrying the weight of years she had tried so hard to ignore. Her gown still clung to her from the rain, Adrian's coat warm over her shoulders, the scent of peppermint still lingering on her hands. But ahead of her waited the confrontation she could no longer avoid. Gregory's footsteps echoed sharply behind her. Natalie, he barked, his voice slicing through the silence like he owned the right to interrupt her thoughts. She stopped. Not because she feared him, but because she was done running. He caught up with her, straightening his jacket, more worried about his image than the woman in front of him. What the hell was that? He demanded. You just disappeared. Do you have any idea how ridiculous you made me look? There it was. His priority. Not her pain, not her humiliation. Just his reputation. I needed air, she said softly. So you run outside in the rain like some drama queen, he snapped. You embarrassed me, Natalie. People noticed. She felt something inside her shift. A quiet, final click. The sound of a door closing on the version of herself he had kept small for far too long. Maybe they notice more than you think, she said. Gregory scoffed. Oh, please, don't start. You've been off all night. If you had something to say, you could have waited until we got home instead of storming out like a child. The word hit her. A familiar weapon. Belittle, control, dismiss. I didn't storm out, she replied. I walked out. There's a difference, he rolled his eyes. You always twist things. You know exactly how to ruin an evening. She laughed quietly, a small, disbelieving sound. I ruined it, she said. Gregory, you took my drink and handed it to another woman. You shut me down in front of a room full of people. He waved it off. Because you were rambling about plants at a tech gala. Seriously, Natalie, learn when to be quiet. Not everything is about you. The word should have hurt. They once did. But tonight, they slid off her. She took a slow breath. Do you hear yourself? She asked. He frowned, confused. Not of tonight, of this. Of feeling like a ghost in a life that's supposed to be mine too. You're being dramatic, he snapped. You have everything. No, she interrupted quietly. I have everything you think I should want. He froze for a second, surprised she dared to say it. Let's not do this here, he said, lowering his voice. You're emotional. You're overreacting. Let's go home and talk. No, she said, firm, steady, unmovable. His eyes widened. He wasn't used to being told no. I'm leaving, she said. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. Leaving? To where? With what? Come on, Natalie, be serious. I am, she said. More than I've been in years. His voice dropped into something darker. If you walk out that door, you lose everything. She stepped back, the weight lifting from her shoulders as if she was finally putting down a burden she carried for too long. No, she whispered. If I walk out that door, I finally get myself back. His jaw tightened. You think you can survive without me? You only say that because you're terrified of who I might become without you. For the first time, he fell silent. She removed the coat from her shoulders, held it gently in her hands, and stepped past him. Natalie, don't do this, he said. But the fear in his voice was new. She turned one last time. Gregory, I already did. Then she walked away, her footsteps soft but her resolve loud enough to echo through the hallway, through the doors, into the night. She wasn't walking away from a marriage. She was walking toward the woman she'd almost forgotten she could be. The night wrapped itself around Natalie as she stepped outside the gleaming building. The rain wasn't harsh anymore. Just a soft drizzle, falling gently like the sky was finally exhaling for her. For the first time in years, there was no driver waiting, no warm car, no hand guiding her toward a life she didn't choose. It was just her, alone on a wet sidewalk, holding a pair of heels in one hand and the weight of every silent sacrifice in the other. She walked barefoot, letting the rain cool her skin, letting the world feel real again. Every step felt like shedding a version of herself she had outgrown. When she reached the row of taxis, she hesitated. Home didn't feel like home anymore. Every room inside that mansion carried echoes of the woman she had been forced to become. So instead, she searched her old cracked phone, the one Gregory never bothered to replace because he thought her world was small enough. She found a cheap hotel with narrow hallways, flickering lights, and a quiet that felt honest. Checking in took everything she had left. Her hands trembled as she took the room key. The receptionist, an older woman with soft eyes, looked at her for just a moment and said, "Whatever happened, you survived it. Good for you." Natalie almost broke right there. But she held the tears back until she was alone in the tiny room. The space was small, just a bed, a desk, a thin window facing a parking lot. Nothing compared to the mansion she left behind. Yet somehow, it felt more real than anything she'd had in years. She sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time since leaving the gala, she let herself cry. Not polite tears hidden in a bathroom, not the quiet sobs she swallowed in the dark, but deep, shaking tears, the kind that rebuild a person as they fall. Or maybe hours. Time felt suspended. When the sobs finally faded, she wiped her face, looked around the tiny room, and whispered, "What do I do now?" There was no answer. Morning came quietly. Sunlight filtered through cheap curtains, painting soft lines across the carpet. She showered, put on a simple sweater and jeans, clothes that felt like they belonged to the real her. With no laptop, she used the hotel's ancient desktop in the lobby to search for a second-hand one. She found one for $120, cracked at the corner, slow but alive. She bought it with what little she had left from old freelance jobs Gregory never cared to know about. And suddenly, that small hotel room became her office, her studio. Dug through old folders. And then she found it, her thesis, her dream, her voice. Pages of sketches, models, diagrams, solutions she once believed could change a community. She spread the pages across the bed, a landscape of everything she used to be, and everything she could be again. Days passed, maybe weeks. She worked until her eyes burned, until her fingers hurt, until her back ached. Instant noodles, vending machine snacks, and an unshakable will kept her going. Every time she doubted herself, she remembered Adrian's words, "Some minds are too rare to let them shrink in someone else's shadow." So she kept building. Draft after draft. Idea after idea. Page after page. Until finally, she had it. A complete proposal. Detailed, bold, visionary. With trembling hands, she attached the file to an email addressed to Adrian Vale. She stared at the send button for a long, breathless moment. Then she clicked it and placed her head on the desk, exhaling the first real breath of her new life. Because whether the world noticed or not, Natalie Finch had just found her way back. The next morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of day where even the sky seems hesitant, caught between storm and sunlight. Natalie stood outside a towering glass building, her thrift store laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her heartbeat echoing louder than the traffic around her. Concade Urban Investments. This was the world she once dreamed of entering, a world she had abandoned for a version of love that demanded she shrink. Now, she was walking back into it with nothing but courage and a cracked laptop. She checked her reflection in the glass doors, simple black blazer, hair pulled neatly back, no diamonds, no mask to hide behind. Just her. Inside, the lobby buzzed with sharp footsteps and fast conversations. People here walked with purpose, their confidence rattling against the marble floors like a constant reminder of who belonged. Natalie approached the front desk. "I have a meeting with Mr. Adrian Vale." The receptionist glanced up, her expression shifting instantly from polite to respectful. "Yes, Miss Finch. He's expecting you." Those words steadied her. He was expecting her. The elevator ride to the 57th floor felt impossibly long and painfully quick all at once. Her mind raced, imagining every possible outcome: rejection, doubt, disappointment. But when the doors opened, she stepped out. because fear wasn't going to send her back to the shadow she had escaped. The assistant led her to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. The skyline stretched out like an unwritten future, waiting for her to claim it. Two men were inside. One was stern, middle-aged, with sharp eyes that looked built for evaluation. The other stood as she entered. Adrian. No suit today. Just a charcoal sweater and quiet confidence. But the sincerity in his eyes was exactly as she remembered. Natalie, he said warmly, offering his hand. I'm glad you came. Her chest loosened just a little. She sat. The man beside him introduced himself. Martin, head of development. His tone was clipped, a man who cut through pretense like paper. He opened her proposal and adjusted his glasses with the precision of someone who had destroyed thousands of weak ideas. Then the questions began. For the next hour, Martin grilled her relentlessly. Why this design? What data supports your projections? Explain the flood risk mitigation in simpler terms. Where did you get these numbers? Why is your cost estimate so precise? Every question felt like a test meant to break her. But she didn't break. She explained. She defended. She countered. She clarified. She held her ground not with arrogance, but with deep, quiet knowledge. This project lived in her bones. By the time Martin leaned back, exhaling slowly, Natalie's hands were trembling under the table, but her voice had never been steadier. Adrian finally spoke. You worked on this alone? Yes. No partners, no funding, no team? He exchanged a long look with Martin, a look she couldn't decipher. Then he turned back to her. Tell her what you told me. Martin cleared his throat. Your proposal shows more depth than teams of senior architects produce in months. The environmental systems, he continued, the water flow integration. I've only seen understanding like this from engineers with decades of field experience. Your work is professional grade, exceptional. Natalie blinked back sudden emotion. No one had validated her in years. Her brilliance had been sitting in a box under her bed while she lived in someone else's shadow. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of a door opening. Natalie, this isn't just good, it's visionary. Then he offered her two paths. One, we buy your proposal outright. You get a big payout. We take it from here. Safety, money, an easy escape. Two, you don't sell it, you lead it. Her heart stumbled. This becomes your project, he said, your company, your legacy. Then added the words that changed everything, and I back you, fully. Natalie stared at him. You want me to run it? No, he said gently. I want you to build it. Silence filled the room, vast and sacred. Her hands trembled, her breath shook. The little girl inside her, the one who once drew cities with worn-down pencils, felt seen. A warm, proud smile spread across Adrian's face. He stood, offering his hand. Then welcome to your new life, Miss Finch. And when she shook his hand, everything she once buried rose to the surface again. Not for him, not for anyone else, but for herself. The weeks that followed moved fast, faster than Natalie ever imagined. Her life, once small and quiet, suddenly felt like a river breaking through a dam. The Vidian Canal redevelopment project. The moment Adrian's firm announced it, the headlines exploded. Unknown architect leads 500M urban revival. Who is Natalie Finch? A new vision for Chicago. Her inbox flooded. Interviews, requests, invitations. People wanted to hear from her. Not the man she once stood behind. For the first time in years, her name wasn't an afterthought. It was the headline. But across the city, someone else was reading those same headlines with a tightening chest and a growing sense of dread. Gregory. He first saw her face on a massive digital billboard while driving downtown. He blinked, then blinked again. But the image didn't disappear. It was Natalie. Confident, radiant, standing beside city leaders with a project worth more than anything he had ever built. He pulled over, hands shaking around the steering wheel. His phone buzzed, messages pouring in. Did you know she was this talented? Why didn't you support her work? Gregory, what happened? He stormed into his office, trying to convince himself that this was just a moment, a fluke, a passing spotlight. But it wasn't. His executives exchanged looks the moment he entered. The kind of looks people give when they've lost confidence but don't want to say it out loud. A packet sat on the table, graphs, investor responses, comparisons between his failing numbers and the rising buzz around Natalie's project. Greg, investors have questions, one said quietly. They want to know why you never mentioned your wife's talent. The words hit him hard, worse than he expected. Because the truth was ugly, he never wanted her talent to shine. If she grew, he would shrink. If she rose, he would look smaller. And now the world knew exactly how blind he had been. In meetings, clients asked subtle questions, then bold ones. If you couldn't see brilliance in your own home, how can we trust your judgment? His answers sounded weak even to himself, and slowly, his empire began to crack. Investors pulled out, partners distanced themselves, rumors spread, confidence faded. His board called an emergency meeting. He knew exactly what it meant, and for the first time in a long time, he felt fear. Not fear of losing the company, but fear of facing the truth he had spent years avoiding. He hadn't just underestimated Natalie, he had erased her. And now that she was seen by the world, truly seen, his shadow held no power over her anymore. The board voted, unanimous. Gregory Finch was removed as CEO. His world collapsed in the exact silence he once forced upon her. Meanwhile, Natalie's rise was unstoppable. She didn't become loud. She didn't become arrogant. She didn't seek revenge. She simply worked. Long nights filled with blueprints and meetings. Warm conversations with community members who finally felt heard. Tough decisions shaped by compassion and vision. She wasn't chasing the spotlight. The spotlight was chasing her. And as the city rallied around her brilliance, Gregory watched from the sidelines, powerless, uninvited, replaced by the woman he once tried to keep small. Late one night, unable to sleep, he opened an online interview of hers. The reporter asked, "Ms. Finch, what's the biggest lesson you've learned?" Natalie paused thoughtfully, then answered with quiet power, "Silence is not peace. And dimming yourself for someone else's comfort is not love." Gregory shut the tablet quickly, as if the truth inside those words burned his hands, because finally he understood. He hadn't lost a wife. He had lost a future he never deserved to control, and Natalie had finally stepped into the light that was always meant for her. A full year passed, not quietly, not gently, but with the unstoppable momentum of a woman rebuilding her life brick by brick. The Vidian Project, the same design she once hid under her bed, was now transforming the city, one beam, one garden, one restored waterway at a time. Construction crews worked from sunrise to sunset. Families watched from sidewalks, pointing excitedly at new bridges, fresh walkways, and cleaner water. The once-forgotten canal now shimmered with life. Children played along the banks. Artists painted murals. Couples strolled under the glow of lanterns. The groundbreaking ceremony was unlike anything Chicago had seen in years. A glass pavilion stood at the heart of the project, surrounded by people of every age, every background. Community leaders, students, architects, city officials, families who'd waited decades for this moment. Camera crews lined the pathways. Drones hummed overhead. Journalists whispered Natalie's name as they prepared their microphones. But behind the stage, Natalie stood quietly, breathing in the magnitude of it all. She wore a simple navy pantsuit, elegant, strong, understated. Her hair was pulled back, not to hide, but to stand tall. She didn't need diamonds. She didn't need a spotlight. She didn't need anyone to announce her worth. She was the worth. She was the story. Adrian appeared beside her, adjusting his cufflinks with casual ease. "We're starting in 2 minutes," he said softly. She nodded, exhaling slowly. "I'm nervous," she admitted. He smiled, that calm, steady smile that had never once tried to overshadow her. "You'll be great," he said. "And even if you stumble, this entire city will catch you." She laughed quietly, not from humor, but from knowing she finally had people who believed in her. When her name was called, the applause rose like a warm wave. Natalie stepped onto the stage, her heels clicking softly against the wood. She paused at the podium, letting the moment wash over her, not as validation, but as a reminder of how far she had come. Then she spoke. "Good morning, everyone." Her voice was steady, warm, strong. "When I first designed this project, I was a student with nothing but a sketchbook and a belief that forgotten spaces deserved to breathe again. This canal was overlooked for years, just like many people in our communities are overlooked every day. Soft murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. But I learned something," she continued. "No place is beyond saving, and no person is beyond rediscovery." The room went silent, sacred, listening. "This project isn't just about architecture," she said. "It's about dignity. And the simple truth that beauty belongs everywhere." Applause rose, but she wasn't finished. "Thank you for believing in this dream and for giving me the chance to find my voice again." When she stepped back, the audience rose to their feet. A standing ovation, some wiped tears, others smiled with pride. Adrian approached the podium afterwards, speaking warmly about the project and its future. He placed a hand gently on her back as he passed, supportive, steady, never claiming credit that wasn't his. But far from the stage, beneath the shade of a tall oak tree, stood a solitary figure watching everything unfold. Gregory. He looked older. Watched the woman he had once belittled stand in the center of a crowd that adored her, and for the first time, Gregory truly saw her. He saw the brilliance he tried to dim. He saw the strength he tried to control. He saw the dream he never believed in, now coming to life without him. A hollow ache settled in his chest. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost the privilege of being part of the future she built. He turned away quietly, unnoticed, irrelevant, the way he once made her feel. Later, when the ceremony ended, Natalie stepped away with Adrian to walk along the canal she envisioned in her 20s. The water sparkled, the breeze brushed her hair. The city felt like it was finally breathing with her. Adrian matched her steps, not in front, not behind, but beside her. "You changed this place," he said softly. She shook her head. "We changed it." He looked at her with a kind of admiration that wasn't possession, just truth. "You know," he said, "when I first met you that night, I didn't see someone who needed saving." "No, I saw someone who just needed space to become who she already was." Her eyes softened. "I'm still learning who that is. That's the best part," he said. "You get to meet her a little more every day." And together, they walked along the glowing path, not as rescuer and rescued, not as billionaire and architect, not even as future lovers, but simply as two people walking into a future she finally chose for herself. 2 years passed. 2 years of rebuilding, reshaping, and rising higher than she ever thought possible. What began as a forgotten thesis hidden in a box under her bed was now a living, breathing masterpiece woven into the heart of the city. The Vidian project was no longer an idea. It was a legacy. The canal, once polluted and ignored, now flowed clear and bright, reflecting lantern lights like silver stars. Families gathered for picnics. Children fed ducks along the bank. Artists painted murals under the bridges. Elderly couples walked the winding paths hand in hand. The entire community felt reborn, and everyone knew the name that made it possible. Tonight, under a breathtaking glass pavilion at the center of her creation, hundreds of people gathered to honor her work. Architects, city leaders, environmental activists, students clutching notebooks, families who had watched their neighborhood transform from forgotten to unforgettable. Camera lights flashed. Soft music drifted through the space. The air buzzed with admiration. Backstage, Natalie stood in a deep green gown. Simple, elegant, rooted in the very color that had defined her project. She didn't look nervous. She looked ready. Ready to stand in a world that finally saw her. When her name was announced, the applause rose like thunder, warm, long, genuine, one of the highest honors an architect could receive. And it was hers. She took a breath and began her speech. "When I started this project," she said, "I wasn't trying to change a city. I was trying to remember myself." The audience grew still, listening. I lost the sound of my own voice. A soft murmur of empathy moved through the crowd. "But life has a way of reminding you who you are," she continued, sometimes gently and sometimes through a storm. She looked out at the canal, at the water gardens, the lights, the people, all blooming because she finally believed in herself again. "This project was built from a wound," she said, "from the hope that something broken could still become beautiful." A few people wiped tears. "Your story isn't over just because someone else stops reading it," she said softly. "And dimming yourself for someone else's comfort is not love. It never was." The crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation that felt like a warm embrace. But far outside the pavilion, hidden in the shadows between two tall trees, stood a figure watching quietly. Gregory. He looked older than the last time she'd seen him. Exhausted, defeated, carrying the weight of consequences he finally understood. He watched her glow under the lights. He watched the city rise for her. He watched the future she built, a future that no longer had space for him. And for the first time, he saw her clearly, not the quiet woman he once dismissed, not the accessory he used to display, but the visionary he was never worthy of. A dull ache tightened in his chest. He hadn't lost her at the gala that night. He had lost her long before. Each time he dimmed her voice. Each time he broke her confidence. Each time he convinced her she was smaller than she truly was. And now, standing in the shadows, he felt the harsh truth. It was too late. No apology could rebuild what he had destroyed. No regret could undo what she had become without him. He turned and walked away, not out of anger, but out of understanding. The understanding that she had outgrown the world he kept her in. After the ceremony, Natalie walked along the canal, letting the breeze brush gently against her skin. Lanterns reflected in the water like floating constellations. Footsteps approached softly behind her. "Adrian!" He didn't speak right away. He simply matched her pace, giving the moment room to breathe. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said finally. She smiled, still absorbing the weight of the evening. "Thank you." He glanced at her, gentle but sincere. "Not just for the project, for choosing yourself, for fighting for your voice, for coming back to life." She took in the water, the gardens, the laughter in the distance, the pieces of a future she had built with her own hands. "I feel like I lived several lifetimes to get here," she said. "And you're just getting started," he replied. Their shoulders brushed, soft, unforced, meaningful. And for the first time, Natalie didn't feel like she was rebuilding. She felt like she was finally living, not in someone else's shadow, not in someone else's story, but in a life she created with courage, with vision, with the quiet power of a woman who finally remembered her worth. Every powerful story reaches a moment where a person stops waiting for someone else to choose them, and finally chooses themselves. For Natalie, that moment didn't come under applause. It didn't come under a spotlight or with an award pressed into her hands. It came long before all that, on a rainy night, in a borrowed coat, standing in the quiet shadow of a life that no longer felt like her own. She walked away with nothing, no money, no home, no certainty. But courage doesn't need comfort. Courage doesn't need permission. Courage needs truth. And that night, Natalie finally told herself the truth. I deserve a life where I am visible. Her journey wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. It was built on grit. On lonely nights in a tiny hotel room, on cold food and cracked laptops, on hope she had to rebuild from dust. But piece by piece, she rose, not to prove him wrong, but to prove herself right. The Vidium project became more than architecture. It became a monument to the version of her that refused to stay buried. It became proof that when a quiet woman finally speaks, she can reshape entire cities. It became proof that healing isn't revenge. Healing is rediscovery. She didn't rise to defeat anyone. She rose to remember who she was. And the world remembered with her. In the end, Natalie Finch wasn't saved by a man, a job, or a chance encounter. She was saved by the one person she had forgotten to believe in, herself.